Welcome everybody to another edition of the Daily Space Weather. Today we'll be talking about solar magnetism, the B field, Z fields, and propaganda. First we're looking at the sun in 304 angstroms. Large filament in the southeast. No sunspots. This is a 48-hour SDO video. Let's take a look at some more stuff, as there's plenty of stuff to talk about. Here are the magnetic fields at helioviewer.org, faded to 171 angstroms. Those filaments appear to still be holding steady down there in the southeast. Here's a 304 angstroms view. And some interesting fireworks down there in the southeast. Next we'll look at the real-time solar wind here to see recent shifts in the phi angle, current phi angle around 114 degrees. Looks like a coronal hole wind stream striking right now as the solar wind density has just dropped down from the highs of around 18 protons per cubic centimeter down to about 4. So I'm expecting the solar wind speed to come up, currently very low levels, barely at 300 kilometers a second. Solar wind density, 420. And here's Geospace Magnetosphere movie. Everything looking pretty steady so far. And that's 4 hours of data. Expecting to see a decrease in the pressure here at the end. As we see very, very low, there you go, there's a very low velocity solar wind as the density dropped off. And really the density and the velocity. So here's the ground magnetic perturbation situation. And since we're living through a geomagnetic excursion of pretty epic proportions, South Geomagnetic Pole in the Southern Indian Ocean, 2 North Geomagnetic Poles, the net pole somewhere east of Greenland. Anyway, there's 4 hours of ground magnetic perturbations thanks to our patrons, the real source of funding for the content. We are also in other places, and we are about to make merch. I was not expecting to be as busy as I was the past couple days, or I may have already ordered some merch to get a prototype for you. We're also on Subscribestar, so please consider supporting the channel via the links below the video. And we are streaming live to Twitch. We typically also update YouTube and BitChute daily with our latest content, so check us out in those spots. And we've recently reached 190 subscribers over there on BitChute, thanks to our newest subscribers over there. Next, we've got the 171 one-day movie here from HelioViewer, showing you that area there, which never quite got named, but it actually was a sunspot. You can see that active region now decayed to plage. It was not a sunspot long enough to get a name, which would be 12 hours, by the way. And so some good views of that filamentary region down there in the southeast in 171 angstroms. And we've moved on to the highlights section, otherwise known as Smash Lights, where I talk about whatever I want. I could talk about China, for you can. Or I could talk about COVID, and wearing masks and how dumb it is, how ineffective it is for healthy people to wear masks. I just made up a jingle about how ineffective it is for healthy people to wear masks. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, we're also on Instagram. And I'm just making fun of some more Google junkware, since now Brave Browser will not allow me to sign in to my YouTube account on the browser, making it even less convenient to continue putting up content on YouTube. Let's talk about our forefathers, the country's founders. How about some quotes to honor the Independence Day weekend? It is the duty of the patriot to protect his country from its government. That's one from Thomas Paine. Let's see what Marquis de Lafayette says. When the government violates people's rights, insurrection is, for the people and for each portion of the people, the most sacred of the rights and most indispensable of duties. And this is no longer stuff of speculation of warning. Have you noticed the government doing some things you'd prefer that it not do? Have you noticed some propaganda? There's been some problems around the internet lately. Have you noticed, I don't know, fraud, censorship, abuse, scams, etc., coming from not only the government, but also big tech, media organizations, and various other corporations doing all sorts of things to, shall we say, trample on your constitutional rights? Anyway, that said, it's up to you to make America not suck again. So congratulations on surviving Fisher-Price, my first pandemic, as mankind has an utterly infantile reaction to various things lately. Please leave a comment if you think it has to do with the fact that it's an election year. You think it's going to be a great year next year for big tech companies? Do you work for a big tech company? Are you planning on liquidating your assets, moving them to Seychelles, and then moving yourself to a country with no extradition treaties to avoid prison for misleading your shareholders? Yes. Let's talk about a dean of medicine who got fired for simply stating everyone's life matters. Apparently it's now controversial for a doctor to state that everyone's life matters. Dr. Neil Boylan was heralded last September as a visionary leader by the university in taking over the deanship. She's the dean of nursing, actually, not of medicine, but nonetheless, I think it's probably important for nurses to understand the fact that everyone's life matters. And here's the quote. She said, "Black lives matter, but also everyone's life matters. No one should have to live in fear that they will be targeted for how they look or what they believe." Well, you're fired. And I just wanted to show the headlines on HuffPo because I think there could be a little bit of fear-mongering going around on the internet. What say you? Oh my God, after a very disturbing week, Fauci says country headed in wrong direction. Chris Hayes at Trump's America's laughingstock around the world. Herman Cain hospitalized for COVID hours after condemning masks. How about a National Guardsman sent to L.A. protest is under investigation for ties to the Proud Boys? Oh, yeah. If my voice sounds a little beat up, it's probably because I've been shouting about propaganda. Have you noticed a bit of propaganda all over the news and possibly even in things like corporate memos? Anyway, if you're not familiar with propaganda, it's the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person. Otherwise known as ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause. Also, public action having such an effect. It's what we call propaganda. Now, don't capitalize it because that's a specific congregation of Roman Curia, and who cares about that? We're talking about the propaganda on platforms such as Twitter, Google, and Facebook, where they have all the benefits of a platform while behaving like a publisher and spouting their own propaganda and attempting to affect elections and do all kinds of other utterly inappropriate things while misleading their shareholders. Anyway, I've survived a global pandemic so far. And congratulations on your doing the same. By the way, your ancestors have survived much more serious issues. Let's talk about Dr. Robert Epstein. Here's a little clip from when he was talking to Ted Cruz before a Senate Judiciary Committee.
Am I understanding you correctly?
Senator, with respect, I must correct you.
Please.
If Mark Zuckerberg chooses to send out a go vote reminder just to Democrats on Election Day, that doesn't cost him a dime.
Were you aware that millions of votes were affected in the 2016 presidential U.S. election?
2.6 and 10.4 million, depending on how aggressively they used the techniques that I've been studying now.
Anyway, Google affected between 2.6 and 10 million votes during the 2016 election, and right after they realized they didn't get Hillary Clinton elected, they cried and wailed and moaned and had a big meeting about how they would, quote, prevent another Trump situation, which they're actively trying to do, which is part of the reason why we've created smAsho.com/forum. There's a whole thread in there in the free-for-all section, and by the way, the whole forum is free currently, although it could go behind a paywall tomorrow. Why? Because we're underfunded. So consider funding the channel via the links below the video, increasing the probability that these videos might continue to A, exist, B, be free, and C, be socially visible, publicly visible. Were you aware that Google is a scam and not a verb and a real piece of turd? Anyway, we've got a 3-page article about it. It's all kinds of articles, and none of them are sharticles. Are you familiar with the AdSense scam? Well, it lies in just 2 facts. They can ban your account if they suspect even a teensy bit that you might have done something to violate their TOS. And by the way, they can't pay you anything until you reach a $100 threshold. And by the way, if you get buried in search, as some channels do, you won't get more than 40 views a day, and yada, yada, yada. Now, I forgot to cover this one yesterday. It's the Eta Carinae system, which includes 2 massive stars believed to be 30 and 100 times the mass of the Sun, and they orbit in a period of 5 years or so. And we're interested in how these produce so many gamma rays. Now, there's quite an interesting scenario going on in this area, as the distance between these 2 stars varies between the distance between the Sun and Mars and the Sun and Uranus. Please understand the distinction between your Uranus and a hole in the ground, and as one's a planet and the other one is like a sinkhole, for instance. Anyway, they emit a whole bunch of photons in some interesting energy ranges, such as 10 giga-electron volts. And it's an interesting system, let's just say. Here's a little animation. And I guess we can't full screen it, but whatever. Here's a little zoom in. Some of the largest stars that exist. I thought there was a different animation here, but anyway. So yeah, there's quite an interesting situation going on there during the orbits of these stars. And obviously, since their distance varies so much, they're going to have very varied interactions with each other. The Eta Carinae system, Eta Carinae A and Eta Carinae B. So a huge shock front being created as there's a plasma exchange going on and interaction with their magnetic fields and so on. This article's on phys.org in the astronomy and space section. And here ends today's Smash Lights section, where I reappear and then continue to talk about whatever we want. We're going to go on to solar data in a minute. And by the way, please leave us a comment. 10.7 centimeter radial flux, still at 68 solar flux units. And I would note that right here is the solar cycle 24 solar minimum, just in case you were wondering or being confused about it. Here's the GOES X-ray flux, which is currently flatlined as we don't see any sunspots. And the proton flux is similarly flatlined as we don't see any big coronal mass ejection events happening, so no surprise there. GOES magnetometer is looking pretty steep here, and we're going to continue to see some very spiky readings here on the GOES magnetometer, so keep an eye on that throughout the day. And here's why I'm saying so. It's data from the Gong 2, showing us significant striations here in the heliospheric current sheet, and we're going to remain solidly in the North Pole current sheet. And we're going to see some bumpy magnetic roads ahead over the next at least 24 hours. And we also see major changes in the B field happening right now. So this is super interesting also, as this is another sign of the sun ramping back into higher levels of behavior, higher levels of activity, a strengthening of the north solar polar field, it looks like. As you can see, that B field being pulled down there, and don't worry folks, it's totally normal. It has to do with that activity down in the south, on the southeastern limb there, and it's something to keep an eye on throughout the day. And by the way, the B field is shown here in blue, and it is sort of the net effect of these two poloidal fields, the north solar, the solar polar north and south fields. So the B field is kind of the net result of how these two fields interact with each other. Keep in mind the data is about 2 hours old and can change at any time due to the way magnetism works. It's highly unpredictable. And that's why we view the Gong 2 data, because it's one of the most succinct ways to see what the sun's doing. Next, looking at stereo A on the coronagraph, we do see a little more ejecta coming out of the non-Earth facing zone out here. Earth is in this direction from stereo A. No significant coronal mass ejections in our neighborhood. Here's the view from the LASCO C2, which is between the Earth and the Sun. Nothing to write home about there. Here's the LASCO C3, a zoomed out version of the same thing basically. And you can see a little bit of ejecta out of the east there. Nothing to write home about there either. Here's where stuff is in the solar system. And we're now using the desktop version of theplanetstoday.com. There's where stuff is now, and where it'll be in 1 week is anybody's guess. Next, looking at a star chart. By the way, if you get up before dawn, go check out Venus. It's pretty high in the sky right now, and the third brightest object is visible after it gets light. Next, looking at some more data here. Here's the electron flux, and it's quite low, remaining flatlined. And we're not expecting to see this come up really now either, as we're expecting an increase in the solar wind velocity. So as the coronal hole wind stream finally strikes, we should see the solar wind density kind of level out and the solar wind speed come up. So I'm expecting a solar wind speed in the 400s. Watch that to happen throughout the next 24 to 36 hours. And the GOES electron flux will totally crater during that period. We see some anomalies once again over this area. On the total electron content forecast, this gives you an idea of things like GPS errors. And we see some significant nighttime GPS errors happening there over Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Next, looking at just one of those layers, it's the ionosphere. This is 6 hours of data courtesy of Australian Government Bureau Meteorology. It's looking a little discharged here on both the night and daytime sides. Pretty normal there on the last frame, coming at you late, 9:45 UT. Slow slip earthquakes in Cascadia are predictable, says this article on phys.org. Do I have an opinion? Not really, as I am not the world's foremost earthquake forecaster, more of a reporter when it comes to this stuff, as I keep my forecasting in my lane, if you know what I'm saying. So here's a little video about slow slip earthquakes, courtesy Caltech. And it's going to show you an animation of a subduction zone here and play some funky noises and show some spooky earthquakes. Let's hope we don't see a big quake there, a 9 magnitude or a 7+ magnitude near Portland, as that could be a bad time for a fairly bad place. Let's move on to look at the last 24 of earthquakes. And we see a swarm on the western coast of South America, west of the Andes Mountains. Let's scroll up the list. Yeah, my voice is shattered because of too much motor mouth. So we don't see anything over a 6 magnitude, a bit of a lull here. None of those quakes over western South America are at deep depth. Deep depth. Speaking of deep depth, here's one nearly 200 kilometers at Tonga. It's a 4.7 magnitude. And I stand corrected. One of those Argentinian quakes was at depth. That one coming in about an hour and 45 minutes after the deep quake at Tonga. It's a 4.5 at 168 kilometers depth. So a bit of an earthquake lull here. Don't be surprised to see this kick off as we're seeing basically a drought of large quakes. If you're in an earthquake-prone zone, please have a plan to be an asset, not a liability in the event of a disaster. Be an asset, not a liability. And how about this? Make Earth not suck again. Mensa. Make Earth not suck again. Mensa. Check it out. Sangay is erupting. There's a nice image from IGEPN. And we're here on volcanodiscovery.com, looking at the last 24 hours of volcanoes. Includes Mount Abico, flight level 14,000. Mount Takono, flight level 7,000, as it also explodes. Sangay. Small ash plume there, about 1,700 feet. Revenador, flight level 15,000 as it explodes. Sabancaya, exploding, flight level 25,000 there. Weak emissions from Nevados de Chilean are an indication not to attempt to do a handspring over the caldera. Next, we're looking at pressure cells here on windy.com. Windy.com. They've also got a great mobile app. You can download it for free for your smartphone. And we're advancing this in the GFS forecast. It's pretty calm weather here in the U.S. What's it like where you are? Over this lovely 4th of July weekend, what do you have planned? We'll let you know later and put up a bunch of content over the weekend. There's where we expect things to be according to the GFS forecast tomorrow at 12 noon my time. Next, lightningmaps.org, and I always like to know where lightning's striking. What about you? Next time you hear thunder, perhaps check it out. Convince your friends and your foes that you're Thor or perhaps Odin as you forecast thunder. How about water vapor maps for Europe and Africa? Water vapor maps for the Far East and Oceania. Water vapor map for the Americas. Here it is zoomed in on the U.S. We do have a convergence zone happening there over the central area, just west of the Mississippi Valley, or the western Mississippi Valley, rather. And let's zoom in on Kansas. Let's see if we have any evidence that the Wicked Witch has had a house land on her, or maybe she's not in Kansas anymore. Anyway, all that moisture is rotating clockwise instead of counterclockwise, meaning it's sort of at the mercy of this dry air that's surrounding it. And here's a U.S. Doppler radar. Some strong storms striking Missouri. And hey, Smash Team, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to share the content in your social media. If you enjoy it, press like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell your friends, tell your foes, tell your science pros, and tell your science noobs about the channel. And now it's time for me to vanish. And thank you for flying American Smashways. Please keep your head and arms inside the Smash plane at all times, as we've got 3 bonus features. First of all, it's the intensitygram to show you 0 sunspots. Second of all, it's the colorized magnetogram to show you where the fields are organized. And it's all in the east right now. It's all on the east side. East side, yo. And last but not least, a 48-hour SDO video in 131 angstroms, one of my favorites. A crowd pleaser. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, stare at the sun, don't drink, and if you do, don't drive. Let us know what you're doing this lovely holiday weekend. Happy Independence Day. If I don't see you in the meantime, I'll be coming at you with more content soon. Maybe. And since it'll never be now again, welcome to the Neo-Renaissance. May that solar wind be at your back and that atherosclerosis absent from your arteries.